TV Crazy Man here. In this video we go back to 1982 to talk about the most excellent time travel series, Voyagers. You'll discover some awesome fun facts from the show and some funny goofs you may have missed the first time around. Just in case you never heard of the show, Voyagers are time travelers that were plucked out of time and trained to help history along the right path.
Give it a shove where it's needed.
In the year 1982, Phineas Bogg accidentally lands in the room of one Jeffrey Jones, the young son of a late history professor. Jeffrey's dog ends up stealing Bogg's instruction book, and when Jeffrey falls out the window, the adventure into time begins. Phineas Bogg was played by the late actor Jon-Erik Hexum. Jeffrey Jones was played by Meeno Peluce, a child actor that did a lot of guest appearances in the 80s, including one of my favorite episodes of The Incredible Hulk. Before we dive into any more trivia facts, let's look at some Voyagers goofs. In the pilot episode, Bogg and Jeffrey save baby Moses by pulling him back into the Nile and on the right course. But I wonder, did Pharaoh's daughter carry her own plants around? Because it looks like those plants are in planters. One thing I love about this show is the pace and how 1 second you might be in ancient Egypt and the next you might be in 1918 at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, where Bogg has to help the Wright brothers with a certain airplane project. It's interesting how modern society can push its way into any time period piece like this. Doggone jets.
Waiting to prove?
I always love pointing out instances where stuntmen pop up, like in the episode Created Equal.
They seem to be tiring. Won't be long. They seem to be tiring. Won't be long.
Sometimes, of course, they are more noticeable than others. Like, there's no way that dude is Jeffrey. And that is totally not Bogg. Voyagers had a strange rule. You see, at the beginning of every episode, Jeffrey and Bogg would always leap into the first time period wearing the exact same clothes they wore on the pilot episode. But whatever they had on in the second leap in the middle of the episode, that's what they were stuck wearing into the next time period. Until the next episode, and it was back to the pilot episode outfits. I guess it was kind of the same way they always had the characters on Gilligan's Island and Bonanza wear the same clothes every week. So that they could reuse shots more often. I wonder how far these stuntmen had to fall on some of these shots. And I wonder if they meant for that horse to fall down like that. In the episode Merry Christmas Bogg, a young George Washington says goodbye to his mother in 1746 in front of Bogg and Jeffrey. But they may not be the only time travelers around. There was one unwritten rule in the 80s. Every vehicle, when crashed, must end up in a fiery explosion, even if it was proclaimed that the gas tank was empty. And that's what made the 80s such a blast. Here's another stuntman sighting.
Sorry.
Bogg loses his boxing gloves in mid-flight and gets them back again. I think I may have found a couple more time travelers. Or it could be a couple of crewmen hanging by the horses. Meanwhile, back in 1890, it looks like a truck is a little ahead of schedule. Now let's look at some amazing facts from Voyagers. Voyagers only lasted one season.
Bat's breath.
But in that short time, they met a lot of historical figures. They helped put Moses back in the Nile, helped the Wright brothers build their airplane. They met Sam Clemens as a young boy before he was Mark Twain. They saved the young Teddy Roosevelt from Billy the Kid, helped Ben Franklin fly his famous kite. Of course, Teddy Roosevelt probably never met Billy the Kid, but anyway. Now, if you love Voyagers, there's a good chance you're a fan of another earlier time travel series called The Time Tunnel that ran in the 60s, to which I noticed there were a lot of similarities, such as You know, the Voyagers leap into each time period. They fly through time. Well, Tony and Doug sort of fall through the corridors of time. They both even have a Pearl Harbor episode, and both sets of characters meet Abe Lincoln. They also both have Titanic episodes. Both have Robin Hood episodes. On the time tunnel, they meet Joshua, who took over leadership of Israel from Moses. Of course, on Voyagers, they helped Moses as a baby. Both shows have Billy the Kid. Both shows had Pirates episodes. Both sets of characters meet Marco Polo. Both only had one season. See if you can name some more things that they have in common in the comments. I'm sure there's probably a lot more. If you're interested in the time tunnel, I have a video on it too. On the episode, An Arrow Pointing East, Bogg and Jeffrey run into Robin Hood's pals, Little John and Friar Tuck, and make a Tarzan joke directed at actor Denny Miller at the same time.
Bogg, be careful. He looks like an ape in a man's suit.
Now, Miller actually played the King of the Jungle in the 1959 movie Tarzan the Ape Man. And a few years later, he played a jungle man on Gilligan's Island named Tongo the Ape Man. But he was actually playing an actor playing a Tarzan-like character on that episode. Friar Tuck was played by Mills Watson, who will forever be known to me as Deputy Perkins from Sheriff Lobo. Miller also guest starred on an episode of that series as well. Man, I wish they'd put that show on DVD. I used to love that show as a kid.
There is a man, the legends tell, who stands for what is right.
Before he was number one on Star Trek The Next Generation, Jonathan Frakes played Charles Lindbergh on the Voyagers episode An Arrow Pointing East.
See your son alive.
Bogg, he's not gonna make it.
Meeno Peluce played in so many things in the early 80s, it would be easier to list the shows he didn't appear in. I mean, he was in everything. The A-Team, Hulk, Happy Days, Silver Spoons, Remington Steele, Scarecrow, Mrs. King. Well, it's just too many shows to name.
Smart kids give me a pain.
I think when you look back at the 80s, The Voyagers was probably the best series of that decade that didn't really get a chance. They put it up against 60 Minutes, and as far as I remember, never even tried it in a different time slot. From what I read, the show they replaced it with didn't even get half the viewership as Voyagers had gotten. Sometimes I think network execs don't actually know what good programming is, and when they look up on it, they don't realize what they have. I'd almost be tempted to hope for a reboot, but man, they would probably do the old, let's modernize it bit and ruin the whole thing. But I sure would like to see it again.
You are as stubborn as a mule. I like that.
I hate to end the video on a sad note, but of course, if you're a fan of Voyagers, you probably already know that Jon-Erik Hexum sadly passed away way back in 1984 from an accident on a new show he was working on. And sadly, it was an accident that probably could have been avoided had he known about the dangers that firearm blanks presented. I remember hearing about it as a kid and being amazed that a blank in a firearm was actually dangerous. I mean, back then I thought it was about like firing a toy cat pistol. Be sure and talk about your memories of this fun series in the comments. Hit the like, and if you love classic time travel series, check out my time tunnel video. Well, thanks to everyone that has subscribed and taken the time to comment. Y'all have a great day. Now keep an eye out. You never know when a person standing next to you could be from another time period.
If you want to learn more about Billy the Kid, take a voyage down to your public library.